Similarly, the cup is good. Speed out your profile. What do you want to do?
I can just quickly go over it.
Sure.
It's pretty long. So I want to bore people on that.
Sure.
So, okay, just a quick thing about the, I just told you, I'm a principal engineer at Apollo Group. We are it's a Fortune 500 company with, this just go off. Can you guys hear me? Just let me know if you can't hear me, I'll try to speak as well. We're mainly into the education business. The Apollo Group owns University of Phoenix. It's one of the, it's into the for-profit education space. One of the largest universities, definitely in the US, if not in the world. We have probably 500,000 active students or faculty at any given point of time. So while we are no Google or Facebook or something like that, we still have fairly big systems in play. So I was stunned when I heard that we actually had like a 750 terabyte database across data across all our databases. So it scares the crap out of me actually. But predominantly we working on web applications, NDR architectures, large-scale systems. One of the things in my role is like I get the chance to work across a cross-functional team. I actually work with like front-end people, middleware, back-end, and DevOps quite a lot on a daily basis. So I get to see a few perspectives around some of the technologies that we use. So hopefully I can shed some knowledge around that. And as I just told you guys, we've been working on getting MongoDB into our data platform. This is, just to give you an overview, it backs our, as I was saying, we're into building SaaS-based applications for multi-tenant SaaS-based applications for our customers, or to-be customers. And so it's a service-oriented platform architecture, and MongoDB serves or will serve piece of that platform. Now, one thing, I've personally worked with Mongo for a while, but I can't claim that we've used it in production for a whole lot. We're actually maybe a month or 2 months away from using it. So maybe next time I'll have some more stories to talk about. Cool. I probably went through a few of these, but just a quick show of hands. Java, I think that's predominantly the case. Okay. Any .NET? Okay, cool. Right. Few Ruby folks. Cool. PHP, few. Okay. So RDBMSs. Everybody. Okay. Any NoSQL folks? Cool. Did you say Voldemort or what did you say you guys use? Oh, okay, it is MongoDB. Neo4j. Neo4j, yeah. Okay. So I had to ask, anybody with new SQL stuff? NeoDB, VaultDB. Okay, all right. So it's not plugin. Just out of curiosity, EHCache, Memcache, Redis. Memcache, Redis, anyone?
Redis once using Rescue.
Sorry.
Redis while using Rescue.
Rescue? Okay, alright, okay. So how many guys host physical? Their own bare metal, their data center, your machine? Okay, everybody else is virtualized?
Yes.
Self-hosted or any cloud provider kind of thing? Self-hosted, bare metal or virtualized? Mostly virtualized. Okay. So I guess this is mostly ruled out. EC2. EC2. Okay. Linode. Okay. Rackspace, anyone? Rackspace. Okay. Physical and virtual or just virtual? And multiple data centers, multiple regions, HA, DR.
Multiple reasons.
Which regions?
Like, if you would say, like, our application has been used in multiple, like, UAE, UK.
Do you have your systems hosted in multiple regions?
Exactly, our data centers are there.
Okay.
So we have a setup there, and we use that distributed in
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That was. Alright. So just a quick thing. So few buzzwords. It is an open source, scalable, and we'll talk in a bit more detail about maybe each of these. Document-oriented, NoSQL data store, and some of the features that it provides. Ad hoc querying, which is this is changing. Maybe 6 months from now, whatever I'm saying is just going to be obsolete, but in this space, but that's the nature of it. But ad hoc querying has still been one of those features that separates MongoDB in particular from the rest of the offerings. So we'll talk in a bit more detail there. I'll probably just go through a few examples also. Replication, so it is a distributed database. So replication, auto sharding, we'll talk about these two. And supports MapReduce also. If we have time, we'll talk a little about that, although I don't have any material on that, but we can talk through that. So, so what's up with this whole NoSQL thing? For me, at least, I look towards what is the rationale behind some of these things, why the industry or folks move towards something in particular. So this is my take on things. Maybe some things are off, but over the last few years, right, a few things have happened. Storage has become fairly cheap. Terabyte storages are fairly common. RAM has become very cheap. That's one of the biggest changes. It's not uncommon to find 8-core machines with 64 GB RAM, but are still called commodity hardware. So cheaper hardware, cheaper storage. Web scale applications. I had to throw in web scale there with MongoDB, but popularity of various web services, right? So the explosion of usage. Maybe email and instant messaging were the few apps a few years ago, but right now with all the, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, all the social apps, and a bunch of even enterprise apps or offerings, whether it's Salesforce, huge in the market. It's if you compare it to things like SAP and the Oracle offerings, it's pushing the limits there. So a lot of popularity increase with things like that. This is another thing, and there are a few mobile folks here too, right? So you guys know, there's been a proliferation of always on, always connected devices. So it's like my wife says, I go insane with the phone. You don't use the phone, at least I don't. For actually talking, it's all about data, email, and things like that. So it was pretty much impossible to imagine a company like Foursquare maybe a few years ago, but look at them now, right? So just the opportunities are boundless. So this is probably more than a little decade, but this has played a huge fact. It's a very important factor in the adoption and or lowering the barrier for adoption for a lot of folks. I mean, building fairly large systems with off-the-shelf, easily available software was not that easy a few years ago for those of us who've been working for a while. At that point, you had either the standard offerings or you had to roll your own. So these are some of the things that have happened. But having said this, historically, we haven't had a whole lot of options when it comes to data stores. I mean, it's typically your relational RDBMS based options. There were a few, back in the 80s, I believe, object databases came up, went nowhere. We'll know maybe in 10 years if some of these are also that way, but it's predominantly, for 30 plus years, these have held their ground in terms of providing a fairly generic and good option to store our data, right? But at the same time, at least I've found myself in a couple of these scenarios before. Not all data that we have was a good fit for the relational model. I don't know how many folks here, maybe show of hands again, using denormalization because of, okay, tons, okay, cool. This is definitely something even I've been a culprit of. I mean, literally 99.5 read to write ratios, right? But the schema heavily optimized for writes because there's no data redundancy, there's nothing, insane joins to get data. So I'm not one of those folks who will just knock off databases or RDBMS and say, oh, it's crap. No, it's not. There have been good solutions. But we do have to highlight certain things that are pain points and make us jump through more hoops than we actually need to. This, I don't know, depending on how you look at it, are you lucky enough or unlucky enough to have big data needs? I was just saying, it shocked me the other day. I heard that we had 750 terabytes of data in our company. There's tons of people with more, and this is us not even capturing as much data as we. This is probably us doing 10 to 20% of what we can. So it's mind-boggling with that data. And this was not the case, except for very, very, very few folks. This was not the case 10 years ago. Now, some data is just inherently non-relational. You can model it in relational schemas, but it's maybe not one of the best fit. And who knows about how FriendFeed use MySQL, storing JSON documents as key value stores and all that. Okay. So it's a lot of folks have actually done things like that, and their option or the way they took it was because MySQL was pretty steady in that market then, and all these offerings were still relatively new. This one is my favorite. So just to give some background there, and over the last few months, we were typically in a single data center. Our company grew exponentially in a few years, so some of the redundancy and other things, it was just a luxury that nobody could afford. Not afford from a money perspective, but from a timing perspective. So the last few months, we've been implementing multi-data center, multi-region capabilities for our apps, and we are a huge Oracle shop, right? But pretty much everything is Oracle, a little SQL Server. It's insanely expensive and complex to set up simple replication. Now, doesn't mean it can't be done. Tons of folks have done it, but in my opinion, it's much easier to do it. and maybe I'm biased because I'm an app guy as opposed to a database or a DBA guy, but like the other day, you can set up a MongoDB instance or even Cassandra or Riak or any of these within 4 minutes with replication set up across US East and US West, literally under 4 minutes. And it works for a lot of situations. It won't solve every need for everybody, but it does. So this is one of the important factors, in my opinion at least, why some of these options have become more popular. So quick thing of what we need, right? Large scale data support, big data, speed and performance at a fairly large scale, agility, simplicity. How many folks use Hibernate? Okay. Who loves Hibernate? Why?
It's the way the caching and all the things has been handled over there, and the way you handle the exceptions which you cannot directly do. Like you have to put in a lot of effort when you are directly using the JDBCs and all. So the way it has simplified life of a developer to concentrate on other things like caching and other stuff. That's why.
But I have to throw out all the entity beans. So that for one reason,
Just
that one reason is enough.
yeah.
Actually, totally depending upon your requirement. You should use your Hibernate or not. Sometimes you need ready-made objects with all the capability like Framework provides. Many things like caching, there are many more scenarios. So in that sense, you need not to write your own one tire or one layer that will communicate to database and fetch object and serve you. So Hibernate does that thing, but suppose you have a scenario in that there are 4 or 5 tables and you want data from all of that table. In that sense, if you are using Hibernate and if you haven't implemented in a correct manner, it will slow your application. So totally depending upon your need.
Yeah, I mean, it is, so there are tons of advantages, right? But I mean, one of the biggest factors, the whole, Ted Neward had this post called The Vietnam of Computer Science. And he talks about the object relational impedance mismatch, right? So it's actually an interesting post to read up on but one of the biggest pain points, I mean, is that whole when you're in something like Java and in fact this applies everywhere, right? But there is a huge mind shift that you have to do from mapping from one domain model to the other. The logical model is drastically different from the physical model in a lot of cases, and that's not necessarily bad. In a lot of cases, it's actually good, but it's what I've seen people do is just apply it everywhere. So hence it becomes a problem sometimes. So. But one of the things the reason I brought up Hibernate was, as much as there is the whole ORM, the object relational impedance, but it addresses that to a large extent, right? I mean, anybody reverse engineer schemas from Hibernate, from their object models? Create schema, or do you create schema first and then create the object model?
We do it for JUnits.
Okay, so bring up an in-memory data store and
yes.
Okay.
Always need to have database schedule. You can just for testing purposes replicate the objects and test your application.
So the abstraction that it provides against all, different databases is, just makes it easier to. SQL and H2 are fairly common options there. Yeah. So long story short, there. One of the things that a lot of folks have a couple of colleagues who after I started working with Mongo just took a look at this, and not having to go across and change schemas and talk to DBAs was apparently in their rationale was the biggest reason they were just using. So take that with a grain of salt, but that's one of the things that this enables. Now there are a few pitfalls when it comes to that, and we'll talk a little about that too. But the simplicity, right? I mean, it is a very, it's the set-based model, and it's grounded in real theory, but it's a generic solution which will work for everything. Here, you necessarily won't see that. A lot of the implementations that you do have to be tailor-made, whether it's the schemas, the queries, and all that stuff, tailor-made for the use cases. So we can talk a little more if you have specific questions about that, but I'll just maybe move on. Lowered cost, who doesn't like that? Everybody likes that, I'll assume that. Support for horizontal scalability. So scaling up, I think I have a couple of points, but I'll come back to that one. And based on our discussion around the whole multi-region, multi-data center setup, reliability, high availability is something that, you know, it's not really a luxury. I mean, whether you're a real business or even a startup at all, I mean, if you're down, it has a huge impact on your business or product popularity, right? So only places like Twitter can you get away just throw a whale's picture and like, hey, we're down, sorry. They still are popular. Now, some problems, we talked about this, so I'll quickly go through. Data model changes and updates. I think we had like 100 million record database table once, and so we screwed up the schema there, if we mapped it. But changing that, I think it took like 4 hours of putting the database in like a restricted mode and doing things like that. So other people have much more grander stories that they talk about. Not everybody really has that problem, so just don't be turned off by that just because at small data sizes most databases are really quick. Joins, powerful and expressive, but not always, I think I missed the point, not always are they optimized for reads. And the whole application model and physical model impedance mismatch, right? So that some of the problems we talked about. This is a favorite. A lot of folks, if you see, a lot of these NoSQL options are being used heavily in the analytics domain, where there's heavy insert ratio, insert patterns. So this, you hit various limits, whether it's a SAN storage limit or disk limits, other things which then you essentially have to look for distribution. So some of these problems have turned into feature sets for NoSQL down the line. We'll actually talk a little more about that. Scaling up is limited. You can only, as much as I made a statement earlier, right? 8-core CPUs with terabyte storage, 64 gig RAM, fairly common. I mean, it's not uncommon anymore. But still, you can only go so much. So if you're capturing insane amounts of data, ultimately your option is just to scale out as opposed to scale up. SAN is expensive. I know this firsthand. You can only use so much of it. Quickly runs out as a price option. And inbuilt reliability, resilience, and all this is a requirement in a multi-node environment. If you distribute but don't have inbuilt resilience and reliability, which not every RDBMS option has that. I mean, if you look at DataGuard and other things that Oracle offers, yes, we get some of that, but again, it comes with a price. So, okay, let's go through what exactly is NoSQL. Again, the cliche, not only SQL expression. New set of database architectures that don't have relations, joins, transactions, no schema definition, so this varies, right, in this space. The key is that there's no schema enforcement. So some data stores are not even aware of the structure of your data, right? So in the RDBMS world, you can set up, you can model your data richly, columns, fixed schema, all of that. Here, nobody's going to be able to enforce schemas for most part, and most people won't even realize. So let's say you're storing products and orders, right? If you're just using a key value database, the only thing that for most part they're aware of is the key. They don't, the value is transparent. And some people embrace this strongly. Anybody heard of React? So it's a Dynamo-based NoSQL implementation. Probably close. I mean, it is a key value store, right? So they embrace this really strong. They just implement it with HTTP semantics, and irrespective, you can throw anything at it, whether it's text, binary, I mean, you can store files, all of that. So they don't care about what you're storing internally. So, which is good to an extent, but the real problem that it brings up is that means you can dive into the data and query, right? I mean, if the database does not understand the structure or shape of your data, there's no way you can actually query on top of it. So, to summarize, essentially, you're compromising on a bunch of things you're used to. So that's not, I mean, I'll talk about this later also, but the one thing I wanted to highlight was, I mean, there's no silver bullet or magic pill or any of that. You do give up on a lot of things. So the single most thing you have to be aware of is what are you giving up, and how okay are you with those compromises? Can you still work around those limitations, or are they super critical to you? Now, that's like me preaching a piece of advice. Frankly, before I actually started playing with these options, everybody reads blogs and goes to presentations, right? So it sounds okay, yeah, it sounds prescriptive, but you'll only realize the impact of some of these compromises as you actually do something with it. So I highly recommend that even if it's an academic exercise, you do start playing around with certain things so that it just opens up your understanding and options essentially. So, but be aware of all the compromises. That's the one thing I can say. So, as if I haven't beaten the horse dead, I'll again highlight we don't have joins. Most data stores, I think somebody asked for aggregation, to cover the aggregation framework on the meetup. We'll talk offline about that. So, no aggregation, no querying, or very limited querying, nothing, no transactions. Once you move beyond interacting with a single data entry, whether that's a key value pair or a document entry or anything, transactionality is out of the window. So for all the beating that SQL gets, one of the key things is, and that's it is probably one of the most widely adopted. We all love standards, but nobody adopts it really at the same time. But SQL really, I mean, is probably one of the more popular and well adopted standards. In this space, nothing. I mean, if you want to, so today you have, let's say even if you are using key value databases, right? Today you use XYZ, tomorrow you want to use something else, you have to re-implement pieces of it. So there isn't a standard interface that you can use across all databases. So something to be aware of. There's a huge ecosystem built around RDBMS's SQL-based offerings. Whether it's BI support, I mean, it's insanely easy to point various BI tools, open source, super expensive ones. Everybody does that. I mean, you can just do Jaspersoft, Penta. Everybody has products. Just point it to a database, do a few things of setup, and you can start dumping data into the BI store. So the point there is, I mean, there's a large and rich ecosystem around RDBMSs, still lacking in this space. I think Pentaho and Jaspersoft announced MongoSP, so in December, that they are integrating with MongoDB. So it's growing, and over a period of time, it may actually get fairly okay. I don't see it getting excellent anytime soon, but something to be aware of, right? I mean, if you want, in an enterprise, nothing is siloed. As much as people are siloed, nothing is really. So you constantly need something or the other to talk to data stores. Limited access patterns, that's the query capability I was talking about. Some data stores don't even have secondary indexes, so you cannot query by anything except the key that you stored the data with. Is this too much detail? If you want me to go faster, just let me know. Okay. What do we gain? Hopefully we gain something. So, scalability. Okay. So, we gain scalability, I mean, and everybody has their own interpretation of this, but essentially, key thing is you gain horizontal scalability, not instead of, but in addition to vertical. I mean, all too often, sometimes people forget to scale their NoSQL instances up first before they scale out. If you're using some, please leverage scaling up as much as you can and then scale out. It's much easier. But the thing is that pretty much everybody has horizontal scalability anyway. Flexibility, agility, no schemas, great. Easier to make changes, but it's like the law of conservation of energy, right? I mean, it just changes shape and form. It's not like you can magically get rid of it. The database doesn't do that for you anymore. You yourself have to still do it in the application. So that's the one takeaway from that point. The last point is somewhat debatable, but I still threw it up there. You do gain performance. I mean, simplicity, and if you have a good enough data set, and once you tune your store, you will, for most part, get improved performance. But the thing is, it is very subjective, right? I mean, I think this. Elliot, he's the CTO of Tengen, right? One of the things they say is they don't publish benchmarks because of that same reason, that because performance is so subjective that one size fits all or one benchmark doesn't really mean anything unless and until you actually implement your use case and pattern, you won't realize how exactly it does. So I'll skip simplicity. It's not everybody needs a high-end database, whether it's Oracle or even MySQL is overkill in some cases. That's the one thing I hate about it. So the last point there was lower TCO. So total cost of ownership. This takes a little time, but if you have found a good fit for some data stores over a period of time, there is potential for lowering the TCO. Again, potential. It depends. If it's not a good implementation, and or you made a wrong choice, or you realize that your application has changed drastically, well, maybe you have to reconsider that. But for most part, initially you can move pretty fast, and in this world and time, in a lot of cases, that is super critical.
Question.
Yeah.
So in total cost of ownership, it states that NoSQL solutions can use literally, hardware that is otherwise to be scrapped. I mean, they can make use of any sort of hardware. So would that account for total cost of ownership being low?
That is one of the things. I mean, so leveraging commodity hardware to almost crappy hardware in some cases. DBAs are expensive. I'll say that. But one of the things I said, the barrier for entry is fairly low, right? I mean, you can actually get up and running with something really quickly. So you could probably get further in actually building and understanding about and concentrate on your product. I mean, if you know the basics of it, right? On building the product a lot more as opposed to fighting the system. It's like how the Ruby enthusiasts bag out Java all the time, all that boilerplate code. So it's just a different manifestation of that same thing. So yes, down the line, if you hit the jackpot, or if you have that requirement, scalability and other things are much easier to do. So the combination of all of this is, in my opinion, what probably gives that lower TCO. Was that? So lower impedance mismatch between use case and solution. I think this is more true of document stores than some of the key value stores. But even for key value stores, that is actually true. Another buzzword, better suited for cloud computing because some of the things we just talked about, and because of cloud computing, right? In virtualized hardware, I forget who it was recently, yesterday or it'll come back to me, but I think a colleague forwarded this to me, but one of the companies, they just lost their entire setup because Amazon rebooted all their instances without a notice. So resiliency to failure is I mean, you're safe till you hit this problem, and once you hit this problem, it is a career limiting thing. I have seen that multiple times. So, okay, last thing, your mileage may vary initially, but the key thing is there are options. It's like there is a big world outside of the well. So just play around with things and see what you like. You will definitely win some battles, lose some battles, gain some advantages, but also some other headache. How many folks are familiar with the CAP theorem? Okay, alright, I'll quickly cover this. Eric Brewer brought this up a few, I think, 2003? So, of the three properties of shared data systems, which are data consistency, availability, and tolerance to network partitions, only two can be achieved at any given moment in time. Or, in my words, cannot have your cake and eat it too. Theorem of distributed computing. So you can't have everything when it comes to data consistency, and we have, I think I have definition of this, but so consistency, I mean strict consistency here you're dealing with is if I do a write to the system, can subsequent, I mean this is an oversimplification, but can all subsequent reads see that write? So that's where the strict consistency and eventual consistency models come into picture. Availability is simply, I mean, is your system available for reads and writes at every point of time? I mean, whether it's because you lost a node or you're down for maintenance or anything, I mean, it has to be up and running. Partition tolerance is an interesting one. I certainly didn't run into this for a while, but part of the reason is because you're typically so used to having single server systems that partition tolerance isn't much of an issue. But once you expand into a distributed system, multiple nodes, multiple regions, and things like that, and if you want to keep data, replicate data everywhere, do all of that. Then network partitions play a big picture. If you have a big enough system and you have been running it for enough time, you will run into network partition. I mean, it's just as node failures on things like EC2 are a given, that's a given.